So for our DMA 60, we are going to lecture on sections 1 and 2. As we begin here in section 1, we are going to be looking at exponents. When we have an exponent, what happens is we have a value that's called the base, and then up here in the upper script is the exponent. So if I have, for example, 5 squared, 5 would be my base, the 2 would be the exponent. The exponent represents how many times you multiply the number times itself. So 5 squared, it does not mean 5 times 2 is 10. The 2 means I'm multiplying 5 times itself twice. So that would be 5 times 5. 5 times 5 would give me 25. Let me show you here on the calculator. I would type in my base 5, and then if you notice this key here, x squared, that would be the key that would raise it to the second power. So 5 squared gives me 25. Another way to type in an exponent, not all exponents are going to be a 2. A lot of exponents are going to be other numbers, but I'll still demonstrate with a 2. Another way to type in an exponent is to press, do you see above the division, I call it a caret. It looks like an upward arrow. When you press that, it raises it up to the power, and it allows you to type in the power. And then enter, that will be 5 squared. If I had 5 to the third power, 5 3 times, that will give us 125. So this is the button that raises to a power, okay, other than using the square. Let me show the difference between -8 squared and the difference between that and -8 squared. -8 squared, there is no parenthesis. So that means I have -8 times 8. So on the calculator, negative sign is down here at the bottom. -8 squared is going to give me a -64. But -8 inside of a parenthesis squared means I'm multiplying -8 times -8. Negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. So if I come here and I use my parenthesis and type my -8 and square it, you'll see that it is a positive 64. And for those of you that are new to NASH taking our DMAs, you are allowed to use your calculator on your homework, classwork, and on your test. So it would behoove you to learn how to use your calculators. Right now, if you have your Leap Log workbook, I'm actually going through some of the examples we have here, and you can do these with me. Go to page 6-6. I just did the first question, -8 squared, and then I added to that my other example showing the difference between whether or not you happen to have a parenthesis with the squared. So this is a way for us to be working through and you to be doing your workbook problems along with me as you're going through these. Because what will happen is before you test, I will check your Leap Log workbook. We'll meet in our Google Meet session, and then you're going to show me holding your book up to the camera, and then that way I'm able to see and check that you've done your assignments. Okay, here we have our next problem is 4 times 5 squared. So that would be 4 times 5 times 5, or you can type 4 times 5 squared, and that would give you 100. For this one, we have -6 squared, which means we're going to square the negative sign, and a negative times a negative gives us a positive 36. The last one on this page is 2/3 to the 4th. So that means we're going to have that fraction 2/3 multiplied by itself a total of 4 times. Now let's look at how to type in a fraction. I'm going to do, well, there's two ways that you can do it. I'm going to do the parenthesis first, and then here I'm going to press alpha, y equals. I'm going to choose number 1, which will give us the fraction, and see how it gives me a numerator and denominator. So my 2 is going to be on the top. I'm going to arrow down, put my 3 on the bottom. Now notice my cursor is down here. If I try to type a right parenthesis, it's in the bottom, and that's not going to work for me. Okay, so let me go back and delete that. What I have to do is press this right arrow, and it makes it come out from under the bottom of the fraction. Now I can do my parenthesis. I need to raise it to a power of 4. So we're going to use this little caret key and raise it to the power of 4. Press enter, and that gives me 16/81. It was 2 to the 4th power and 3 to the 4th power. So 16/81. It's going to be imperative that you learn how to use your calculator. You're going to be using this in your subsequent math classes after this. So they'll be expecting that you know how to use these. Okay, on page 6-7, here we go again. We have a problem where we are given 3x to the 3rd power y. We want to evaluate this expression when x is a 4 and when y is a -2. So that means we're going to have 3 times 4 to the 3rd power. The y is going to be the number -2. So we're going to multiply those, okay? So we have 3 times 4 raised to the 3rd power. Now notice my cursor is still up here at the top. Press the right arrow, and then we're going to type in the times -2. That gives us a -384. -384. Here we have 9/x squared. And in this case, our x is a -3. So that means 9/. Now, the x is squared. Our x is a -3. So my numerator is still 9. A -3 squared is going to square that negative sign, which gives me a +9. And 9/9 simplifies to be the whole number 1. At the end of section 1, there will be a little block on that last page of section 1. I believe the page number 6-17. If you flip over there for a moment, you'll see all of the answers of what we have just done now. So it is self-checking. So when you do your workbook assignments, do not do it in your notebook. Actually write in the workbook, because when we check, I'll ask you to hold up certain pages and then you'll be able to show those to me. But as you're working, it's self-checking. So if you miss something, you can go back and rework it and do it backwards to get your solutions to those. Okay, so as we continue, and if you flip over in your workbook to page 6-8, the big thing that we're looking at in this module is the properties of exponents. You will need to learn these, commit these to memory. You will not be able to have a cheat sheet with these properties written down. You will use these properties in DMA 70, DMA 80, all of Math 143, and all of your Math 171. So whichever of those classes you go into after this, you will be expected to already know these. They're not hard, and as you practice these, you'll find that they come pretty easy. The first thing that we have is if you have a base raised to a power and they are being multiplied, in order to get the answer, you can simply add those two exponents. So a to the m times a to the n we would add the exponents m plus n. And we'll come back in a few minutes. I'm going to go through all the different things first, and then we're going to do specific examples in each of these. Okay? If we have a to a power, and if that's in a parenthesis and we have a power to a power, what we do with these is we are going to multiply the exponents. If you have more than one item in the parenthesis and there's an exponent on the outside, that exponent applies to everything, every individual item inside of that parenthesis. If you have what appears, let's say we have a to the m over a to the n. This is like a division problem. In this scenario, we take the exponent in the numerator and we subtract the exponent in the denominator. If you have a parenthesis and there's an exponent outside, it applies to the numerator and it applies to the denominator. Notice the parenthesis is around top and bottom. If the parenthesis was only around the top or only around the bottom, the exponent only applies to what's inside of that parenthesis. Anytime you have a base to the power of 0, that answer will always be 1. We don't like negative exponents, so if you have a negative exponent, you'll be asked to rewrite it as a positive. So that means this is going to drop down to the denominator. You have to put a 1 as a placeholder for the numerator, and then the a to the n would be in the bottom. Another thing would be this. This numerator, if it has a negative exponent, and notice I did different bases. So this one, just like here, drops to the denominator. The b to the negative m, where it's going to go is it's going to come up to the numerator. So the negative makes the top go to the bottom, and it makes the denominator come up to the top in the numerator. So this particular page here would be some notes of things that you want to remember, okay? In your workbook, turn to page 6-10. On page 6-10, we're going to look at these couple of problems, okay? We have 8 to the third times 8 to the sixth, m times m cubed times m9. Make sure you're on the same page as me. And then we have negative 2a to the seventh, b squared, 3a to the fifth, b. Okay, this is a skill practice. This is the one where we are multiplying the same base, so we're going to add the exponent. We do not need, in this particular problem, to give an actual numeric answer. We're just combining the exponents. So for right now, we're going to give an answer of 8. And what is 3 plus 6? That would be the number 9. So they're looking for the answer 8 to the 9th. For this one, m is the base. This one has 3, this one has 9. This does not have a number. So you're going to need to write an understood 1. So we're going to have 1 plus 3 plus 9. Now you don't have to write out this row. You can just use your calculator and add 1 plus 3 plus 9. That's going to give you a total of 13. So m is to the 13th power. Now for this one, we're going to need to multiply these two numbers here. Negative 2 times 3 is going to give us a negative 6. So we have to multiply the whole number. For the a, we have a 7 plus 5. What is 7 plus 5? That gives us 12. And then for the b, we have a 2. There's no number here, it's an understood 1. 2 plus 1 would give us 3. So when you're doing your computer practice, you're going to have skill practices initially, where in this case, when you multiply the same base, you add the exponents. Look now on page 611. On page 611, you're going to see that we have division. So we have 5 to the 7th over 5. Okay? So in this case, we subtract exponents. There's no number here. It's understood to be 1. So we're going to do 7 minus 1, which would give us 5 to the power of 6. Okay, we have a negative 2, x to the 5th, y squared, over 14, xy. The negative 2 and the 14. What's going to happen is the 2 cancels out and becomes a 1. The 14 becomes a 7. So we still have a negative, a 1 here, a 7 here. For the x's, what is 5 minus 1? 4. What is 2 minus 1? Just 1. And there's not an x or y left in the bottom. This whole number 1 is technically not necessary, so you could leave that off and write it as negative x to the 4th y over 7. Now for this one, we have x to the 4th times x squared over x cubed. We're not going to do any subtraction until we combine the top. The top is going to be 4 plus 2 gives us 6, and then the bottom is a 3. Then we're going to subtract 6 minus 3. So my final answer is going to be x to the 3rd. Okay? Let me show you one. They didn't give you an example of this, but you're going to have this when you do your computer problems. You might have a problem where, let's say we have x to the 4th over x to the negative 7th. We subtract. So what we have is 4 minus negative 7. The mistake I see people do is they go, oh, 4 minus 7 is negative 3. Let's use our calculator. 4 minus negative 7. So the minus, that negative sign is not the minus. So it's 4 minus negative 7, which gives us a positive 11. So this one would be x to the 11th. So if you have a negative in the bottom, pay attention and be careful that when you do minus a negative, just use your calculator. You have to remember it becomes plus a positive. Okay, so over on page 6-13. Here we have power to a power. We have x to the 5th to the 4th. Power to a power means you're going to multiply. So what's 5 times 4? That's going to give you a 20. 7 to the 4th cubed. So what we're looking for here is not going to be 7 to the 4th power and then raise it to the 3rd. We're just looking at multiplying the exponent. So what is 4 times 3? 12. Later on, we'll simplify and get a number for that. But for right now, we're just doing a practice of manipulating the exponents. 1 over x squared, all of that is to the power of 5. So 1 to the 5th, that's just going to be 1, because 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. For the x, 2 times 5 is going to give me x to the 10th. Okay? Let's continue looking on. Go over now to page 6-14. Okay, on 6-14, these are going to look a little confusing, but they're really super simple. Do you recall a moment ago, let me slide back up here, on this page. Anything to the power of 0 is what number? 1, okay? So that's the property we're looking at here on this page. Anything to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power is a 1. So what is 4 to the 0 power? That would be 1. What is 3x? That whole parenthesis to the 0 power is 1. What's 1 plus 1? 2. Okay? Let's look at this. Negative 2ab to the 0. Now here, what is raised to the power of 0? Only the b. So we still have negative to a, this becomes just the number 1. So what's negative 2 times 1? Negative 2a would be our answer for this one. For this other one, let me change color so we see it's a different problem. So we have 2ab to the 0. For this, the exponent is outside the parentheses, so this whole unit is a 1. Okay? So that is just working with and using the base to a power of 0 would give you a solution of 1. Okay, now we're going to have some various simplifying. We're still on that same page. We're still on page 6-14. For some of these, let's see what we have. X squared y cubed to the 4th. And I'm not going to do all of these. I'm just going to do 2 of them. So let me write these 2 down. And if I don't do one that's listed on your chart of ones to do, then you just go back and do that one. Because sometimes I won't do every single one. I'll just choose 1 or 2 of the problems. So here we're doing power to a power. So this 4 exponent applies to everyone in between. And we're still multiplying. So for the x, 2 times 4 would give us 8. 3 times 4 is going to give us y to the 12th. Now we do need to simplify the number negative 2 to the 4th. So when I use my calculator, my negative 2 needs to go in a parenthesis and raise it to the 4th power. That's going to give us the number 16. Okay, so we have 16. For my x, 5 times 4 is 20. For my y, that's an understood 1. 1 times 4 is 4. And for my z, 2 times 4 is going to give me an 8. Okay, let's look now over on page 6-15. On that page, we have, now these are written as a fraction. And fortunately for these, we have parentheses around the entirety of the problem. Okay, so we have x, y. Okay, so let's look at these. A, there's no exponent here, so 1 times 4 is 4. For the B, 3 times 4 is going to give us 12. For this one, these both have exponents of 1. So my x is squared, my y is squared, and when I do 7 squared is going to give me 49. We have one last one on this page. For this one, we have 2xy to the 8th, negative 5. Notice when I write my z's, I put a little tick mark in it because what happens to me is sometimes my 2 and my z can look alike, and I do that little tick mark so I know it's a letter and it's not a number, okay? So 2 to the 3rd power, okay? So 2, whoops, wrong key. 2 raised to the 3rd power is going to give me an 8. Okay, so my whole number is going to be an 8. For my x, 1 times 3 is 3. For my y, 8 times 3 is 24. In my denominator, now the negative 5, isn't it inside of a parenthesis? So here, when I do negative 5, I need to have it in a parenthesis. Raised to the 3rd power, that's a negative 125. Negative 125. And my z, 5 times 3 is 15. I need to check and see if that'll reduce. So if I do 8 divided by negative 125, I get a decimal. If you press math and enter 2 times, it'll simplify that. So that does not reduce. Okay, always just check and see if it reduces. So our final answer is just simply the negative 8, x cubed, y to the 24th. The negative, the 125 is on the bottom with your z to the 15th. Okay, if you will, look over on page, let's go all the way over to page 6-20. 6-20 puts us into section 2, 6-20. Now this is the properties where we have some negative exponents. So this is where we're going to look at what happens with the negatives. And we're going to utilize our calculators to help us with these. Now, at the beginning of this, they're only asking us to simplify, and we need to write with positive exponents only. So that would be like where we have a to the negative n would be 1 over a to the n. So this would technically be 1 over 2 to the third. But when you do these, please, if you have numerals, use the calculator. So when I do that, I'm going to do 2 raised 2. Here's your negative sign at the bottom, the negative third. Press enter, I get a decimal. If you press math, enter 2 times, it will convert that decimal to a fraction. So your answer is going to be 1/8. Let the calculator be your friend. Here we have 2 over y to the negative 6. Now remember this example earlier. If you have negatives in the top and the top goes to the bottom to become positive, and the bottom comes up to the top to be positive. So for this scenario, to get rid of the negative exponent here, all I can do is just bring the y up to the numerator. So that's just going to be 2y to the positive 6. Okay, this one, m to the negative 6 over m to the negative 2. Since these bases are the same, we're subtracting. So we're doing negative 6 minus negative 2. So negative 6 minus negative 2 is going to give us a negative 4. So what I have is m to the negative 4th. But I can't keep a negative exponent. We want to write it as a positive. So if there's just a negative, it's going to drop down to the denominator, m to the 4th, and put your 1 here as a placeholder. Okay, let's continue on. We're still on the same page. Okay, so we have here 3y to the 5th, m, no, not an m, it's a z, excuse me, z to the negative 4th. So for this scenario, the only negative is the negative 4. So that means this denominator, I'm just going to recopy what was here, none of that was negative. That z to the negative 4th is going to pop up to the top so that it won't be a negative. Okay, here we have 5x squared y to the negative 2, and then z to the negative 7. Now, none of these bases are the same, so nothing's going to be combined. What we're going to do is move some things. The 5 and the x squared do not move. This y to the negative 2 is going to drop down to your denominator, and the z to the negative 7 is going to pop up and become a positive and put it in the numerator. Okay, and then we have a negative 4 to the negative 3rd, and then we have a 3 to the negative 2nd. Okay, so what's going to happen here is this is going to come to the denominator and become a positive exponent. This is going to move to the top and become a positive. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9, and negative 4 cubed is going to be, so our 3 squared is the 9, and the negative 4 cubed is going to be negative 64. So our answer is going to be a negative 9 over 64. That's a negative sign. Okay. So that's what you're going to be looking at as you are simplifying your negative exponents. So that would be our sections 1 and 2.